We are joined today by my favorite leader in AI safety and governance, Kathy Baxter, Principal Ethical AI and Architect of Salesforce. Welcome, Kathy.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to have an excuse to talk to you and also have an excuse to get you on the air, because I want to talk to you about what is going on. You have been a very busy lady. We have been having such a whirlwind of a year since last year at TDX, when generative AI was like, what is that? I don't know what that is. And now here we are building entire product suites with generative AI. Let's talk a little bit about kind of what you do, because you do a lot of public-private engagement, including being a visiting fellow at NIST and on Singapore's Ethical Use of AI and Data Council. Pretty impressive. And one of your recommendations is really for governments to establish clear definitions and standards. So tell us a little bit more about that.
There are so many different definitions, and a lot of terms get used interchangeably: foundation model, frontier model, AI system. And how do we define these different concepts of bias, toxicity, harm? If we think back to many of the things that have been regulated in past that really impact human society, let's think about food or transportation, medicine. As my coworker and dear friend Yoav Schlesinger had pointed out to me long ago, technology rarely ever begins as safe or inclusive. There's a whole series of these adorable cartoons of cocaine cough drops for children.
I have actually heard about this.
Yes, yes. DDT is good for me, showing shots of housewives spraying DDT in their kitchen cabinets. So, as new things are developing, you don't always know what is safe or what is safe at certain levels. And it takes research. It takes time to know when something goes from harmless to harmful. And that's where we are with AI. We know that bias isn't good. We know toxicity isn't good. But how do we measure it, especially for something that's as creative as generative AI is? So when is something accurate and useful versus when is it offensive and non-inclusive? And so this is where it really takes an all-hands-on-deck approach. Public-private collaboration coming together. And I'm so happy about the US AI Safety Institute. NIST, the National Institutes of Standards, and the Department of Commerce has created this institute to bring together AI makers, researchers, nonprofits to come together and think about some of the nuttiest, most difficult questions. And one of them is around definitions and testing and evaluation and risk. And so this is going to be incredibly important for everybody to come together so we have a shared understanding, we have a shared definition of what is safe and what is not.
Well, and I'm sure, when you're talking about definitions, like a lot of this is really subjective.
It is.
Right? And so, like you said, bringing everyone together, how do you even tackle the idea of figuring out who needs to be part of this and who's part of being in the room and a stakeholder in developing these definitions?
Yes. Community engagement is incredibly important. If we look around the table, oftentimes, the individuals that are building or implementing these models, it's not always representative of everyone that is impacted by it. And so that's where user experience researchers, and I'm biased because that's my background.
You have a little bit of experience
Yes.
with user experience.
So having user experience researchers do community engagement, understanding all the different groups, how will AI be used in ways that will impact each of them? Who benefits? Who pays? Who is this designed for? Who is this excluding? And thinking about that. So we go in and we know in advance what the impacts are on society as a whole. The technology is has so much potential. It's incredibly powerful. But if we aren't thinking about everyone being impacted, it can cause real long-term harms.
Well, and that's kind of the rub, right? Because we work in technology. Technology goes really fast, especially like we were just talking about a year ago. Who would have thought that we would be centering an entire developer conference on basically generative AI products?
Yes.
Which is wild. And that tendency to go fast and innovate and go like really, really go fast and break things is kind of like an old mantra, right, of Silicon Valley. But taking that breath, that step back to think about, like you said, who is using it, but also you have to think about the use cases, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's, for me, I didn't realize that you could use GPT to do a lot of the things that I now kind of rely on it for, like helping me with math problems is my favorite one. But even expanding just how you think about the different use cases, because there's new ones every day.
Yes, absolutely. We talk internally jobs to be done, GTBD, and that's really, really important. Understanding all of our different customers. What are their needs? How can we address them? And in some cases, generative AI will be fantastic. In other cases, it actually won't be a good solution because of this non-deterministic way that the content is being detected. There's just not enough consistency. You might hear the term Goldilocks prompts, trying to come up with just the right prompt to get exactly the output that you are looking for. It's really, really hard. And so having a shared understanding and agreement of what we're trying to achieve, and then being able to measure it and know, are we achieving what we think that we are achieving?
I love that. Okay, so now that we're talking about, you interact a lot with these governance efforts and across the globe, I mean, governments all over the world are trying to tackle this idea of how do we protect people when it comes to AI. And there's very different strategies. I know, there's a different European strategy versus an American strategy just in general. How are you seeing some of what are kind of the top themes that kind of come across with some of the ways you think these global entities, global governments are kind of approaching how they put together these governance standards in place?
Yes, it is incredibly varied across the board with the EU AI Act really trying to come up with one policy that is able to address everything from a high risk to a low risk standpoint. Singapore, on the other hand, they are taking a non-regulatory approach. They would rather create resources that makes it as easy as possible for companies to build and implement AI responsibly. Indonesia is taking a different approach. They're first focused on creating regulations for the financial services industry because they feel like that is the highest risk. Okay. So each country is really thinking about this in a different way, and we really need harmonization across the board. In many cases, there are regulations that already exist that we can leverage. The Equal Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, notified companies a couple of years ago, hey, we don't need new regulations if you are making hiring decisions that discriminate against protected groups, whether it's AI or human, that's illegal. So let's take the laws that are already there, see what we can apply, and then think about what are the greatest risks, and then how do we manage those. But being able to keep track of what is happening across each country is a challenge.
Well, okay, so it's a challenge looking at global governance ideas and approaches. Let's really bring it down to an individual app builder, right? This is TrailblazerDX. It's focused on our admins, our architects, our developers. If you're hearing about all these different standards being developed and maybe you're trying to either A, figure out how does this impact the work my organization or my company is doing, and then B, how should I think about this as an individual app builder? What are your recommendations?
We really need a safety culture. We really need actual safety engineering practices to be implemented at companies where they are tracking harms so they know what's been tested, what are the results, what are the mitigations they've used, have they been successful. So that is really, really important. And luckily, there are decades of experience that we can learn from, like with the aviation and transportation industry. Incredibly detailed kinds of plans there. There's also the NIST risk management framework. that is really focused on process. It's not a set of rules of these are the things that are high risk and bad and these are the things that are not. It's about process and how do you do this kind of end-to-end governance internally. So being able to understand those processes and then find individuals within the company. If you can't hire that expertise externally, invest in your people. Invest in user experience researchers that have a background in, say, psychology, ethics, that can really think about these things, and then invest in engineering and safety engineering throughout your entire company.
Great recommendations. Invest in people. I'm just going to end on that one.
Yes.
I think that's important on any AI
Yes.
discussion. Kathy, thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure
Thank
to talk to you. And if you want to learn a little bit more about some of the amazing AI safety culture work that we're doing here at Salesforce, go ahead and check out this link on the screen, sfdc.co/AI-safety-culture.